Good afternoon, Tom. How are you doing today?
I am a happy man.
You are a happy man. Indeed, we were just speaking about that, and it makes me kind of want to rethink my own email signature. Like I put information in it that you would already know if you're reaching out to me, and so maybe I need a cool tagline too. We might have to brainstorm that after this. Have you always had that as part of your descriptor, or was there a moment in time where you decided to start telling people you were a happy man?
It started many years ago. I think, yeah, more than 20, 30 years ago, probably, and it used to be just something that I think the first time I said it was in Austin, Texas, and I was just diving off a cliff and said, "Oh, I am a happy man," and, dove off the cliff. And I don't know, somehow it stuck, and so.
That's so cool. I love that you can pinpoint where you might have like the first utterance of happy man was. That's so cool. Maybe my tagline just hasn't come yet. I'll just have to wait for a cliff diving moment and see what comes out of my mouth, and then I will know what my tagline is. Well, thank you so much, Tom, for being with me here today. This is Tom Flynn, a found object metal artist, and I'm so excited to hear your story, to know more about what that means. But as always, we'll start a bit further back in your background. Tom, like, what was it like growing up for you? Where were you? How did we get to this point today, having a conversation, virtually, but together in Arkansas?
Interesting. Let's see. I grew up mostly in Odessa, Texas. So out in the oil fields. And if you wanted to attach a smell to my childhood, it would be the smell of sulfur.
Wow.
From the oil wells and the processing plants. And but I guess I spent my early life, I was pretty sure I was going to be a Catholic priest. And when I talk in religious circles, I talk about my 3 failed attempts at holy orders. I studied to be a diocesan priest, and I studied for the Vincentian order, and then I ended up as a Benedictine monk in a monastery in New Mexico, where I was for several years, and that's probably part of my creativity at that point, was for songwriting, and as a musician, a guitarist, we chanted with guitars, and it was a very interesting place, and I still use some of that monasticism today in that the abbot was a Jungian therapist, as well as a former jazz bebop trumpeter, and so we were into dreams and inner work and all that. We taught the Myers-Briggs indicator, and we taught the Enneagram and things like that, and ran a retreat center and a publishing company. And I was the monastic trash man.
Yeah, what does that mean?
Well, it just meant it was, my training was that when you went off campus to drive the dump truck onto the property, to make sure you walked around the truck and banged on the sides of it before you drove onto the campus, in case there was a bear in the back.
Wow.
That was my first day of training as a monk. Yeah, so
someone's got to do it, I guess.
yeah, so.
Oh my gosh, what an interesting world. And I feel like it's one that the general public, or at least me as a member of the general public, I don't know much about it. Are there any, maybe misconceptions that people generally have? Or you said a specific type of monk, like what does that mean? I think of like very quiet days, sequestered by yourself. Is that what it is? Is that not what it is?
Well, this was a very unique monastery and very sort of cutting edge at the time, in the 80s being at the time. And as in, it was a monastery of men and women. So you had brothers and sisters, or monks. We were all monks, but brothers and sisters. And Actually, Susan, my wife, is a former nun from there. So
Wow.
there's a little story there.
I'm sure. Well, the monastery brought you both together, and you said were practicing like musical sorts of art at that time. Did you go in with that passion, or you grew it there, and like were you doing other forms of art, or what was your?
I had been a musician for years before that, mostly a church musician. So, but mostly with guitar. And I still play, I still have a 12-string guitar, and but now my main musical instrument is a little ukulele because it's so convenient.
Yes.
It hangs behind my back on my chair, and while I'm watching TV during commercials, I can just reach back and grab it, strum a couple things and put it back on the hook when the TV show starts again. So
that's so cool. They talk a lot about how like this millennial or whatever the generation is after us, we need to have like 2-screen engagement. Like when we're in front of the TV, we're not comfortable unless we're also in front of our phone. But I kind of wish I had a ukulele behind my back instead of scrolling while I'm watching something, because it might be just a more, it might energize my mind in different, more creative, less stressful ways. So I think that's a cool idea, and great to have that outlet. So you were in New Mexico in this monastery, and then at some point you found your way to Austin, and that's where your found object work began. But how did you get from New Mexico to Austin?
Well, I quit the monastery because I fell in love with one of the other nuns in the community, not Susan. Believe it or not.
Twist.
But it shook me up enough that I knew I needed to leave.
Mm-hmm.
And then I guess about 5 years later, Susan left the monastery and she came to visit, and we just hit it off, and we knew how to live together from living together in the monastery. We had cooked together. We were cooks for the retreat center, so we cooked for 100 people together. So.
Wow. So when you left, did you stay in New Mexico for a little while, or you went directly to Austin? She found you there? Oh, okay.
Yeah.
And what did you assume a new profession at that point? Like what was that like?
I can remember I had told myself I would never go back into engineering, but I did immediately and went back and was an electrical designer. And that's how I got to Arkansas. It was a job here for one of the companies that do a lot of Walmart work.
Mm-hmm. Wow. So you had an engineering degree before or while you were like trying out different like paths, like priesthood?
I don't have a degree in engineering. I'm a senior engineering tech, and I actually train the engineers that come into our office, some of them, so that's
so cool. So many paths up the hill to learning, and I love that. So how did your found object artwork fit into that? It seems like you were pretty busy.
Yeah, it started after Susan and I got married, and this sounds so strange, and I don't. She says this isn't true, but this is what I remember: is she bought me as a birthday present or a Christmas present a art welding class, not arc welding class, but art welding class at the community college. Mm. And I went, and I really liked it, and I started doing it. I started saving up and buying welders and junk, and it's grown from there over the last 30 years. And so she says I always talked about wanting to be a metal artist. The thing is, I don't ever remember talking about that until I took the class.
Someone was talking to her about it. Putting it in her brain.
So it's completely her fault.
That's amazing. I wonder, if she hadn't purchased that class, if you would have ever taken that leap. Like, it's so special how people can like see something for us, or like do something that just changes our trajectory entirely.
I'm so aware of you know, if I hadn't taken that class, I probably never would have, I never would have taken that step on my own. I don't think,
Yeah, well, thank goodness for your wife. And I'm so glad that we get to be here now reflecting on, you said 30 years of this work. You've like a bunch of installations now across Arkansas, I've seen. And we actually met in front of some of your pieces at a mutual friend's gallery. So that was very special. And we'll go into some of your specific pieces, but I want to abstract first, about your style of found object like art and how you approach it. Like, do you get an idea in your head and then you start scavenging for materials, or do you find something? Like, if you could walk me through that.
Well, I set some pretty strict rules, as in, I don't want to change the shape of any object so much that you don't recognize what it was originally. So while it's called a sculpture, there's not a lot of what other sculpture artists would refer to as sculpture. As in, it's more of just an assemblage. So I guess you could say an assemblage artist, maybe. A good example would be like my centipedes, which are made out of two of the garden rakes, that have the things, and they're put together to make the centipede, and then I'll bend it, and then the part that goes into the handle, that becomes the antlers on the centipede. And the whole goal is that you see that it's a centipede. Immediately it's like, oh, look at that big bug. And then, but also, almost immediately that it's made out of two rakes. So there's that sort of an aha with each piece, that you see it and then you see what it's made out of.
Yes, I've seen, I think you've reflected like maybe on your website that like you smile at how things are not always what they appear to be. And I think that element of discovery is really cool, that our brains like know how to fill in the blanks. So like it looks enough like a centipede that, but then you get to look closer and have all these little moments of like, no way, it's a rake and this and that. And I think it can like encourage us to have more of those moments of discovery and recognizing that things are more complex than what's on the surface.
Yeah, yeah. There's more there than there's on the surface, and I guess the inspiration. I rarely set out to make something have a deeper meaning. I'm often just inspired by the shape of one thing. A good example of that is in I can't think of the name of the brewery, one of the breweries here in town, Fossil Cove. Has, they haven't hung it yet, but they purchased a pterodactyl that I made.
Oh, no way.
And the story with the pterodactyl is, I went to a garage sale and I told the guy, I'm a metal artist, do you have any metal? And he went running to the back and he came back out with these two pickaxes. And he held them in his hands in front of me and was explaining that they were his grandfather's or something, and that this one was for gold and this one was for silver. But the way he'd handed them to me, they were in this shape like this, which looked like the head to a pterodactyl to me. And it's like my brain split in half. And at that point, I heard everything he said about his grandfather, but at the same time, the other part of my brain built that whole pterodactyl. I knew what the wings would be. I was fairly sure what the body would be. I knew what position the claws would be in, and that it'd have a long tail. And in that same moment, I was I'm totally inspired by the piece, not by want to do a piece on world peace or security or an emotion or a feeling. It's more that. And then sometimes when those deeper things come out, that's just a surprise. I feel that sort of comes from God, because I can't get there from the specificness that I use for starting my pieces sometimes.
Yeah. And I think that's such a powerful and like brave approach. I think, I just started seeing clients for the first time in my internship, and it'd be great if I could go in and be like, hey, this is all the things that are going on in their lives. This is what I'm going to do before I get in. But if I come in with a solution in mind, like that could completely miss the mark of what they actually, need. And I think with your work too, if you go in like, I'm going to make a teapot today or a truck, then you totally miss the dinosaur opportunity or, the deeper meaning moment. So I think that's really cool. And so you mentioned earlier, like Myers-Briggs and the Enneagram, but I'm more familiar with strengths finders. And there's a strength called connectedness where you see linkages between things that other people don't. And I feel like that's what's happening for you. Like there's this story that someone's sharing, but you're seeing the future of this thing as a T-Rex. And that's so cool how you get to use this work to kind of share that strength with the world. So I think that's really cool.
Well, Carl Jung, the psychologist, he actually spoke sometimes and wrote about alchemy, and he talked about alchemy in your inner work, as in putting things together and then letting them grow. And what I have in my shop is all over. I have 5-gallon buckets and containers and bowls that have almost everything I need to make a bird, or almost everything I need. Like I have one big bucket that eventually will become it's a beetle, a stag beetle, and it all started because someone at work gave me these 2 big metal things that formed like the big claws on the stag beetle, that is out in front of that. And so those claws sat in a box, and slowly but surely, I said, oh, these could be legs. And then those will go in there. And often that it takes, it's 10 years in making sometimes, like the piece of the dragonfly or the damselfly. It was probably more than 5 or 6 years before I had 4 matching rug beaters for the wings.
Wow.
Lots of antique rug beaters out there, but to get 4 matching was really hard. And so I knew what the tail would be. I was fairly sure what the head would be. And but it just took a while.
What a test of patience and perseverance to find those 4 matching pieces. I saw one of your other reflections somewhere. Maybe you said it in our last conversation, that it's like found object art versus hoarding, and the line is very thin. And I too am like, I really want to make things, but I haven't mustered up the courage yet to do it. So I have like random scraps of fabric in my house, or a bunch of lids that seem to match. And I do find it hard sometimes. Like, is it time to just let go of these things? I'm like, I can still see the floor, so I think we're in an okay spot.
Well, and that will come, and your gift is being able to interview people, because you're good at it.
Oh, thank you.
You're good at that. I listened to some of your others, and I was really impressed at how well you bring out people, because, so.
Thank you. It's so much fun.
That's your art in some ways.
Thank you. So I wanted to also ask, you mentioned going to a yard sale and like asking for if they had any metal objects. Like, are there rules to your like foraging or your curation of your pieces? Like, does it have to be that you stumble on them in the woods, or like, do you set any parameters for yourself in that way?
No, like a good example is again the damselfly. There are parts on that I bought at Wheeler Metal. They're industrial parts, pipe caps, and and large bolts, and so everything is found. Some of it is found in a metal yard. It is maybe even found at Home Depot.
That's awesome. I think the flexibility, it helps to make your vision possible when the thing is not looming around in the woods behind the house.
Yeah.
So I'd love to go into some of your specific pieces. I will share my screen and we can talk about your work. Let's see. Okay.
Right.
So is this bacteriophage or phage? How do you pronounce this?
Yeah, bacteriophage. I believe that's right.
Outcome. So can you give me a little bit or share with whoever's listening context about like what these are and how they're like more than they outnumber the sands or something like that you shared?
Apparently, we were watching something on public TV, and they were explaining these, and I was intrigued, and I looked at them, and they had a little movie showing how they worked and everything, and you can see it's got a little needle coming out, I guess, of its crotch there, and it actually that injects cells, and it's smaller than a cell, and apparently there are more of them than there is sand on the beaches in the world. And what they do is they inject cells with DNA, and then the cells will burst into more bacteriophages.
Wow.
But they're good and bad. Some are healthy. Some battle viruses, I guess. I don't know. And some probably spread viruses. I don't really know how that works. Not being a scientist. But what I liked is the shape of it, and I liked that it injected something. And so for this one, because it's all about genotypes and I can't think of the word now.
I have no idea.
It's all about your genes, and so there are letters on the side of it that correspond with the genetic code, and then because it's a code, I also wrote those same letters on it in Morse code. So that it's got code written on the side of it. And I made it hollow. And what I say on the description is that what you do, again, going back to Carl Jung and alchemy, putting things together and letting them grow and see what happens, is that you would put in there what you want to infect the world with.
I love that. I love the symbolism behind it. And I hadn't realized that the actual bacteriophage, like some are good and some are not. But I think that adds to how you can choose what you're infecting the world with. I feel like it works on just like another level in that sense. I also, so this was made of a old medical oxygen tank, right?
Correct, yes.
And I think that's cool too. Like, I don't know whether it was intentional or not, but I feel like when we talk about like life-giving and or life taking or whatever, I just feel like it all kind of resonates and fits into what you're trying to do with the piece. So I really enjoy this one.
Yeah, it's a fun piece. Yeah, it's one of those that it had more meaning than and as I built it started to get more meaning when I started to put the letters on it and everything. The meaning came.
Yeah. So you were watching a TV show that taught you about the bacteriophage, but you didn't have the pieces yet, or you did have these pieces? Did you know you were going to use the pieces that you used?
I was pretty sure when I saw the video what the main body of the bacteriophage would be. And then the other materials on this is it's got like a gate spring in the middle. It's got some horseshoe nails on it, and then just some 1/4-inch steel rod.
So cool. So this one, is this very big? It looks like it's several feet tall.
No, it's probably 2 foot tall.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And this is called Perfection.
Perfection, yeah, and that it was one I had to struggle. One of the things I really like about this piece is it's really heavy. It probably weighs 50 pounds. That football shaped thing there is some sort of core drill, but I could not figure it out. And then on top of that is a water well drill. And then on top of that is a cannonball. And then the base actually sits on legs that make it look like it's floating. And the underneath side is painted black, so it looks like it's floating. I thought that was a good contradiction for something that's so heavy. And the story I tell about this is that sat balanced together with the ball on top in my shop. Well, it actually sat there with a cannonball on top, an actual old Civil War cannonball that I had found. I have several of them. And I knew someday I'd be crazy enough to drill a hole in that cannonball. And they say never to do that because some of them can explode when you do that.
No way.
Well, and then you study about it, and most of them say that it's a couple hundred, it's 100 years old, so it's any gunpowder that was in it. Most of them are not even hollow, and this one sure felt like it was. So it was probably okay to drill it, but I just and there were ways to do it safely. You could build a box around it and stand back and and then sort of control it from 6 or 8 feet away, and you would be fairly safe. But I just knew one day I would be crazy enough to drill a hole in it, and luckily I never was. I actually found a fake cannonball that I bought at a fence and statuary place, and so I drilled a hole in that and used that instead.
So potential crisis avoided.
Yeah, I didn't do that, and I, there's a lot of unsafe things that I do with my work. It's like, it's funny that I am so drawn to this and so involved in it, and I really love what I do, but it's not good for me. It's I have COPD, which means I can't breathe as well as a lot of people can, and I get out of breath fast. And there's a lot of the materials I use when you're welding and when you're grinding things. There are gases and dust that's really not good for your lungs at all. And so I have to be very careful and check my ventilation and there's always that temptation, because I get so excited about what I'm doing, to just, I'm just going to hold my breath.
Oh my gosh.
But as I progress, as my disease progresses, I know that not to do that anymore. And I've slowed down a little. I'm not as crazy as I used to be.
That's how you really love what you're doing, though, to be willing and not even really thinking about risking anything, just because you really want to see the work come together is a powerful feeling, I'm sure. And I don't know if I've experienced that level of that feeling yet. So that's really special. I was kind of like laughing, thinking about you being willing to risk like drilling the hole in the cannon. Like, I'm a city gal and I didn't grow up with cooking, and I don't even own a pan, because the idea of like oil like splattering from it really scares me. So I don't think I'll get to the level of that kind of risk taking with the cannon when I can't even boil water. But I wanted to make sure that I asked about the name of this piece too, because I don't automatically understand it.
There was no symbolism that I attached to it. This is a good example of one that I made, and other people see a lot of meaning in it, as in that the way the drill bit twists up and holds the ball. They see a new birth in that. And I've heard other things. For me, it was just really that the pieces fit together. And it's other people have put a lot of interpretation into it, so.
That's so fun. I my first background was in marketing. We talk about, brand building or stuff. And if you use a name that's kind of nuanced, it gives people room to make it what it needs to be or to grow it how it needs to grow. And I think in this piece, like it is sufficiently abstract that people have room to breathe into it, like what they see for it and take from it what they need. So I think that's really special. This one is Phoenix, and I really enjoyed reading the story about this one and your maybe relative lack of Phoenix moments versus other people. And I would love if you could explain more about that background.
I don't even remember writing that.
So I have it here. And you said something about not as many Phoenix moments as some of my artist sisters and brothers. I've done my best to fail at many things in my life, and being an artist is just the latest. And I thought that was a cool, vulnerable kind of thing to share.
It is. I really, this is relatively new. I've always been creative. I've done a little bit of writing. I've done, lots of music. There are still there may still be some churches out there that are doing my music, that the songs I've written. But I've always been creative, and I think there's a big part of is that courage to do something even though it may fail. And the Phoenix, I think also the reason I said that is because there are so many artists I know that are struggling financially to be artists and are so devoted to their thing and are basically starving artists. And I look, and I have a lot of my friends, I'm the middle class white guy, I'm not a part of any minority at all, Yeah. I'm just the old white guy artist, And so I'm very aware of how lucky I am in that. And that I can do this. I think I was thinking the other day that while art is fun and fun and play can only happen if you're secure and if you're safe.
Yeah.
And I applaud those artists who can operate, who can create and remain unsafe. That would be really scary for me. And that's in that way, I guess I'm not there. I'm not, I'm not I don't know, I guess, or I'm just different, I guess. Because mine comes from a safe place where I can play, where I think other artists, theirs comes from maybe a little more desperation, and there could be more commitment. I could walk away from my art right now and not suffer at all. Except I would, because I really love doing it,
No, I think that recognizing that privilege is really an important step for each of us to know the things that we have privilege in, and how like maybe at a glance it looks like we're all in the same game on the same level playing field, but we're so not. And we can't always we can't change all of that just ourselves, but acknowledging it is an important place to be, and a way to start making good change. And so I think this Phoenix is a powerful symbol. I know, well, I guess I've always thought of the Phoenix as like rising from the ashes. Is that like the analogy to failure here, or how did actually making this specific piece come about?
Yeah, there is that, and that is the inspiration of the Phoenix, is that it comes from failure, and it is success brought from failure, and we'll talk about that a little later too, about my garden of failed sculptures, and and uh, and living with um uh, that nothing's really a failure, I guess.
Yeah, especially I saw your Facebook post yesterday, and I'm really excited to talk about that garden and the new stuff happening there. Um, so
Yeah.
we will I can't wait for that, but I don't want to miss this one. So typist, also very cool. I love how you mentioned there being some homage to like Ruth Bader Ginsburg in here. And some cool earrings. Like, how did this piece come to be? Where did the idea come from? All that good stuff.
I love it when I can find old typewriters at a good price, and they are a real challenge to take apart because they're all flathead screws, and they've been together for 100 years, and sometimes they don't give. And when it's cold and I can't get good ventilation in my shop, and so that's when I go out there and I take apart typewriters and adding machines. And this is all her Ruth Bader necklace. There is actually the part that the keys came up on to strike the pad. That's what held the keys in place when they came back to rest. And then her eyes with the eyebrows are made out of adding machine parts. And then her little earrings are typewriters, and I guess that's the left hand of her side. You can see there's a little switch there. That's what switched it from red to black tape for if you wanted to make red letters instead of black letters.
Huh.
So yeah.
Wow. So I remember for the bacteriophage one, you were watching a TV show and that brought about the idea. Were you watching a Supreme Court ruling that sparked this, or was anything like that going on?
No, that was it. It was not. This is a good one where I'm actually surprised by what people see. I did not, when putting it on that base, think of Ruth Bader Ginsburg, but it was right about that time that she died that I created this piece. So
that's wild. That's so cool.
Somehow my unconscious plucked that out and did that for me.
Yes. Oh, I love that. And I completely see her there. So that's really remarkable. This one I thought was kind of very powerful, and also kind of like funny how it came from building a TV. Like that just and I hadn't like appreciated, there's what is it, a butterfly on the base and a flower, and I just think it's a cool juxtaposition, and I'd love for you to tell the story here.
Well, it came from when we finally went and bought a flat screen TV and a wall mount and little sound bar and all that, and getting it put on the wall. And they had bags they had this long series of bags, and you had to pick the bag according to the type of TV you had, but they had all this leftover screws and washers, and I didn't even use all of them to make this piece. But there's a upside down bowl that's the base that's made out of just hundreds of little screws, and then there's a butterfly there. You can sort of see the wings and a little flower, and that was made out of washers. And then the word waste, because I was just appalled at how much stuff was left over when I finally got this TV put on the wall.
Yes. There's this term that I learned a few months ago called craftivism. So it's a form of activism that like uses crafting to make a stance when you're not yelling in someone's face, but you're creating something that kind of sends a subliminal message. And I feel like this is like in the realm of craftivism, because you're taking this excess stuff and saying something about it that's like soft. You're not in anybody's face, but like it packs its own punch in a way. So I really like that. And I like that it's a kind of active way to deal with the frustration of like, there's just so much in here that doesn't need to be here. Let's give it a different purpose, or like use it to send a message instead of just griping about it to our family members or, to ourselves. I feel like this is along the lines of like actually making a difference with what you learned from having that big box of extra things. So I want to talk a little bit about your teaching now. So you're at the Eureka Springs School of Art, and you also dabble in like presentations to some middle school classes. What's all of that like?
Well, the middle school started first, and there's a middle school that's just a couple blocks from our house. And I think one year they even walked here. It started out that I was doing, and I've probably done it for, I don't know, 10 years now. There's the art teacher there has arranged it where I was giving tours of downtown artwork, because I have some of my artwork that's downtown, and I learned about some of the other things so I could, point out some of the public art to the students. And then they started coming to my gallery or my shop, and like this time, I just sort of set them free and let them do stacking sculptures, and what I got out of it is it rearranged everything in my shop, and it put things that I would not have put with other things. I talked about how I had all my little bowls well, that got all messed up, with 20 kids in there,
Oh my gosh.
And and they were, they enjoyed it, and they talked about it a lot afterwards. So yeah. And that teacher she's the one who I've always had what I call my garden of failed sculptures. And she's the one who sort of inspired me to talk about my failures, because that was something that the students needed to hear. And so over the years, I sort of glorified that space, and I've added to it, and it's moved from where it was just sort of stacked on the side of the shop as a joke to where it was actually, with the help of Susan, my wife, it's in the garden now, and it's got a little area where it sits, and some of the sculptures are in there, not all of them, other failed ones haven't made it into the garden yet. They may have to now, but.
So the first time I learned about your garden of failed sculptures, it reminded me of like the Island of Misfit Toys in Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer. And there's something like very charming and very sweet actually, and probably resonant about things that are just not perfect. Like that is true of all of us. And to have them on display, I think giving something platform gives it like credence and validity. And it's like, yeah, no, in your own right, you're still a sculpture. Like you're not the sculpture I intended originally, or whatever the story may be, but you are a work of art, and like you're celebrated. And I think it's so cool timing how it works, right? And so last night, maybe I was like looking at Facebook, and I saw that your sculptures from the garden are no longer going to be there. Was there a big acquisition that happened? Like, what's going on?
This guy, he said he had bought one of my sculptures. And the funny thing is, the way he described the sculpture, I'm not sure it was even one of my sculptures. It could have been someone else's. But he wanted to come by and see if I had any other work. And I explained to him, I don't have much here except for my garden of failed sculptures, and most of my stuff is in galleries. And I gave him the list of the galleries. He still wanted to come by. So he came by, and he bought almost every piece of failed sculpture out of there. He went away with 3-4 sculptures that were in there, and he bought them. He got a good deal on them because they were, they weren't signed. They were, but it's like you said, they were sculptures. Like a good example of one of the failed sculptures is, it was a flying saucer. It was about this big of a flying saucer that was then balanced on a pole, and on the other side was a bell. So it would swing around, and the bell would ring and the flying saucer would fly around in a circle. And but the flying saucer was right at teeth level and sharp. And it was like, I'm not going to sell that to anyone. No.
Oh my gosh. So buyer beware, but he was really
buyer beware,
persevering.
It's a little
And
dangerous. Yeah.
that's remarkable. So you didn't seek out this opportunity. You weren't even really selling these pieces. This person kind of accidentally, it seems like, maybe got in touch with you. And now you have room to make a whole another 30 years of work because
I can fail more now.
yes. I love that story. And I hope that person shares photos of how they use your pieces in their life and how they put protective barriers against people's teeth. Yeah. All the things. So as we start to wrap up, I love to ask people, about their work. Like, why does this found object work? Why does making mistakes? Why do these things matter? And what keeps inspiring and motivating you towards found object work and towards making mistakes?
Goodness. I'll say this, that I probably one of my favorite wisdom sayings from the monastery is there's this definition of spiritual progress. And the definition is you take one step forward and then you stumble back two, but that's a good thing, you were going the wrong way anyway.
Yes.
And I really feel that's sort of how I go through life. I stumble into things, and I stumble into friendships. I stumble into love. I stumble into this art, and I stumble through these things. And I don't want to ever. And again, even with the teaching, it's like, now I know I've had people that say, "Oh, Tom, that's not true," but I really think that if I taught anyone to weld, and this is true with, if I set someone free for a couple of days in my shop, they could come up with a sculpture, And when I do the course at Eureka Springs at the School of Art there, I fill the back of my truck up with junk, and then they have a lot of junk there at the school and welders, and I teach a little bit about welding, and then I set them free, and it is so fun to watch them get inspired to go pick something up. Oh, I got something, and they'll run off to their welder, and there's this that aha moment again, that inspiration. So for me, it's the class is not so much about welding as it is about creativity and teaching to not be afraid to be creative.
Yeah, I can't wait for the day that I get to take one of your welding classes and have that experience. I'll hold you to this promise that anyone can be a sculptor. We'll see if it works for me too.
And the truth is, with the new technology welders, it's pretty much just like a fancy glue gun.
And I love a glue gun. Those feel much more familiar. Okay, I feel you're boosting my confidence. So I appreciate that. And I like what you that quote, I think is a really great one, of the steps forward and the step back and like course correction. I feel very convicted in my own faith, and this analogy I was given once is like a red light versus a green light Christian. And a green light Christian moves forward knowing that if they're going the wrong way, God's gonna get them on the right way. But you're not expected to stay still and wait. Like, you're expected to trust that and go, or at least that's how I see it. And I feel like that kind of goes with what you were saying. Like, I know that I will be moved from this path if I'm not supposed to be on it, so let me just keep going if it seems like the right thing right now, which takes a lot of faith and courage and whatever, but leads to a really fulfilling life, I think. So what is your advice though for people who are in that moment? They want to learn more, they want to create, they want to learn to embrace failure, but they just don't seem like very comfortable things, or very familiar things for them. Like, what would you advise?
Try everything, you know. Sometimes a sculpture is just going the wrong way and it's spiraling down, and I tell myself, just throw more metal on it. Sometimes that works, sometimes it doesn't, you know. and it's you. And I guess I sort of learned this with my at least the comments that I got on my Facebook post about the Garden of Failed Sculptures, that there's no real bad art. And I really think that maybe every piece I make is made for one specific person, and it may find that person in my lifetime. It may be 200 years from now when that person, the right person, finds that sculpture, and then that sculpture will give them joy every day.
I think that's so cool. It has me thinking back to the bacteriophage. I'm really harping on that one, but like the idea of like what you're injecting the world with, and like your obedience to do it. Like you have this vision in your head, and like maybe it is for someone, and if you don't show up to make the thing, then they don't get to have to reap the positives that come from it. And so I think that's a really cool element that you bring into this accumulated wisdom. Finally, you know, what do you want people to leave knowing about you and your work, and what are you really looking forward to right now, Tom?
Oh, right now, let's see. The project I'm working on right now is, well, it's several. I just finished my first solar-powered LED lightning bug.
I love the lightning bugs.
Course from Eugene Sargent. I don't know if you know who he is, but he's another local artist. I'm taking a course at the Walton Arts Center at the Native Baum place, and it's all about Arduinos and programming and C++ and programming LEDs to do what you want them to. So I've got the LEDs that make a little spiral that now flash on and off at about the same time that lightning bugs do. I found an article that says how their flashes happen, and so I programmed it to, you know, flash off and on in with a random pause in between. So it's neat, yeah.
Oh my gosh. And the lightning bug is what sparked us speaking at Marsha's event. I just think those are so cool. Or the fireflies, however you call them. That's going to be such a nice and powerful addition to them, to have them be moving to the right rhythm of the actual creature.
Yeah. And the other thing I'm working on is a passion flower. And this passion flower will be about 6 foot in diameter. If you've seen those old farm implements that are the hay rakes that have all those tines that come off at a thing, and they're about 5-6 foot in diameter.
Wow.
That's the main body of the passion flower. If you know, the passion flower has all these little tines coming off of it, and then the petals will be post hole spades, which is like like a shovel, but it's sort of elongated. Mm-hmm. And again, there I need like 12, 14 matching post hole spades, and I've been collecting post hole spades for probably 10 years now. And I don't have the 10 or 12 matching ones I want. I'm still working on that.
Oh my gosh. I imagine though, like, especially for these pieces that take 10 years, 5 years, whatever, like you meet so many people in the process of scavenging for these specific things that you need.
And I have my sources now. Yeah, a lot of times, you know, people will bring me things. And if I go to a garage sale and say I'm an artist, sometimes they'll just give me things. Yeah.
That's so cool.
You know, and I have my finders out there. I have one guy that's close to homeless that cleans out barns, and he brings me stuff all the time. So,
you know, your leads, you've got your people.
Yeah, that's my stuff. Yeah.
Takes a dynamic village to make this found object art. And what do you want people to leave knowing about you and about your work? If they were to walk away with one sort of thing of who is Tom?
I guess I would want, I would probably go back to the happy man thing that spread some happiness,
Yeah, I think it sums it up perfectly. It brings us full circle. Tom, it's been such a fun way to spend an afternoon to speak with you and to learn more about your work. I'm really excited to cross paths again in our small, big, in the middle town of Northwest Arkansas. And I thank you, yeah, so much for being here.
Okay, well, thank you, Carol. I really enjoyed doing this, so thank you.